What is this supposed to be? It looks like something a child made with Play-Doh. This will lower the class of my party, so I'm taking it away. The cold, scornful voice belonged to my younger sister, Mandy. She was looking down at the celebratory cake my 10-year-old son Lucas had poured his heart into, as though it were a piece of trash. This was the venue for her birthday and engagement celebration. All the elegantly dressed guests suddenly turned their attention toward us. When I received the invitation from Mandy's fiancé to celebrate both her birthday and their engagement, I knew it was nothing short of a perfectly prepared guillotine. Of course, I had no desire to attend, but this was the final stage of my plan. I would destroy Mandy's social standing completely, right in front of the man she was most proud to impress. To do that, I had to be here. Watching Lucas excitedly say, "I'm going to make Aunt Mandy a cake," honestly made my chest ache. I knew she would trample on his kindness with cruel words. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I still believed, hoped, perhaps, that not even Mandy would openly and deliberately hurt her own nephew, a child. I was betting on the last scrap of humanity she might have left. Unaware that this faint hope would be betrayed in the worst possible way, we headed to the party. On the day of the event, Lucas proudly held out his handmade cake to Mandy. "Happy birthday, Aunt Mandy." I wanted to capture my son's proud moment on video. I took out my smartphone and pressed the record button. The guests' attention focused on the two of them. Mandy glanced at the cake, then grimaced and delivered that shocking line. Lucas's smile vanished, replaced by a wounded expression. Ah, of course. I waited calmly for what would come next. But the next moment, my calculations collapsed. Mandy seized the cake, and without hesitation, she slammed it into the face of my 6-year-old daughter, Katie, who had been standing beside her. "Katie!" I screamed and rushed to my daughter, dropping my phone without a second thought. "How could you do that?" Covered in cream and sobbing, Katie trembled as Mandy spoke with a mocking laugh, utterly unfazed. "Oh, don't cry. You like sweets, don't you? Go ahead, eat it right off your face." Then my mother chimed in with her shrill voice. "That's right, Jenny. Don't raise your voice so much. I'm sure she's happy. Your family is poor, so you hardly ever get a cake like this, do you?" My father listened to them, shaking with laughter. A cold numbness ran through me beyond anger. Ah, I see. These people, they're no longer human to me. Holding trembling Katie tightly, I glared at Mandy. A moment of silence fell, and the entire venue seemed to hold its breath. My mind went completely blank. I had been the target. They were supposed to trample on my goodwill and humiliate me, but she had crossed the one line she must never cross. Mandy had dragged my children, who had nothing to do with this game, into it. I walked through the frozen room and stood before her. "From now on, you're free." Those words were a death sentence, an announcement that their parasitic lifestyle was over. Originally, I had only planned to destroy them socially, but plans have changed. I would make them experience despair to their very core. When we got home, I gently bathed the trembling Katie, washing away the cream and tears. Lucas shut himself in his room without saying a word, so I quietly knocked on his door with a cup of his favorite hot milk. "It's okay. Mommy's here." My first priority was to soothe my wounded children. Once they finally fell asleep and the house grew quiet, I went straight to my office. My time as a mother was over. Now it was time for war. I already had a plan. A cold, meticulous plan to remove them from society legally and quietly. The image of the cake smashed into Katie's face, and the sight of my parents laughing at it flashed in my mind. Something inside me burned out at that moment. A lukewarm plan was no longer enough. They would feel every ounce of the pain they had inflicted on me. How did it all come to this? It all began 3 years ago, on that cursed day. It happened just when I had finally recovered from the grief of losing my husband, and as a freelancer, began earning a stable income again. That was when the hyenas who called themselves my family caught the scent of fresh blood and descended upon me. The first demand came from my parents. "Jenny, please, it's only temporary." My mother pleaded through tears, while my father acted like the tragic hero in some cheap play. I sighed inwardly at their pathetic performance. If I pushed them away, they would undoubtedly storm my workplace or even my children's school, destroying any peace I had left. After calculating the risks, I concluded that the $1,200 I gave them each month was simply the necessary price to keep them isolated from my life. It was nothing more than protection money paid to troublesome parasites. A few months later, the star of the show finally appeared. My sister, Mandy. Hey, I have an amazing opportunity for you. She brought a cafe business plan that looked as if a professional had drafted it. The concept? A fusion of art and organic lifestyle. Just hearing it made my skin crawl. A parade of empty, pretentious buzzwords. When I declined, she played her trump card. I'll put my house up as official collateral. I'll hire a proper attorney. You have absolutely nothing to lose. The moment I heard that, countless calculations flashed through my mind. She didn't believe for a second that I would ever seriously enforce that collateral. But to me, her offer meant something entirely different. If by some miracle the business succeeded, I could push our parents, my greatest liability, onto her. And if it failed, that contract would become my ultimate weapon. With it, I could legally erase my entire family from my life. Whichever way it went, I would finally be free of this hell. So I decided to participate in their little charade. On the day of the contract signing, the attorney Robert Jackson warned Mandy, "This is not just a formality." But she didn't understand a word of it. She signed with the theatrical flourish of an Oscar-winning actress. I also signed without hesitation, wielding the document like a sword to protect my children's future. And so, my hard-earned $70,000 began its countdown to the end of Mandy's life as she knew it. During the first 6 months after the cafe opened, Mandy made the payments on time, just as she promised. It was bait, meant to make me lower my guard. But for me, it was simply a valuable data collection period, allowing me to analyze how catastrophically incompetent her management truly was. It was proof she was still fully immersed in her little, successful entrepreneur fantasy. She sent me photos every day. "Look, we're full today. Isn't today's latte art perfect?" Her cafe was always filled with influencer wannabes posing for social media. I compared her photos with her shop's social media posts, calmly analyzing customer turnover rates and average spending. The conclusion was obvious. Her business plan's promised 35% profit margin was nothing but a delusion. Behind the aesthetic photos, the red ink was piling up like a snowball rolling downhill. Then came the 7th month. No payment appeared in my account. The moment had finally arrived. I waited 3 days before calling her, intentionally, so the conversation would be recorded. As expected, Mandy delivered the textbook excuse I had already predicted. "Oh, sorry. This month my expenses went up because I bought new coffee beans. I'll pay double next month, don't worry." Her cheerful tone was the clearest proof that she was already suffocating financially. Of course, the next month came, and she still didn't pay. When I called again, her voice had turned irritated. "I told you it's fine. The espresso machine broke and the repair cost a fortune. You're so nitpicky, Jenny." Another month passed. "What's your problem?" "So what if I'm a few months late? We're family, aren't we? I knew you'd forgive me in the end." She eventually stopped answering my calls entirely. By then, I had gathered every piece of data I needed for my plan. From that point until the day of that fateful party, I simply waited for the right moment. One day, 3 months after the payment stopped, a single invitation arrived. The first thing I tackled was the rent payment I'd been sending to my parasitic parents through my bank. I used to tell myself it was a necessary cost to protect my children. But now, knowing it only funded their disgusting smug lifestyle, the thought made my stomach churn. I logged into my online banking and opened the list of scheduled payments. My father's name was right there on the list. With all the hatred I felt, I clicked the cancel button. "Are you sure you want to permanently stop this scheduled payment?" "Of course I do." The moment I pressed yes, it felt as if one of the chains that had been strangling me for 3 years snapped with a loud final crack. Next, I sent an email to Robert. It was already past midnight, but I didn't hesitate. Subject: urgent. Enforcement of loan contract for Mandy Walker and report of abusive conduct. In the body, I detailed not only the facts of the contract breach, but also the violent incident at today's party, precisely, calmly, and without emotion. I no longer have any intention of granting further leniency after the inhumane acts committed against my children today, I wrote. I ended the email with this. Accordingly, under Article 7, Section 3 of the loan agreement, I respectfully request that you initiate immediate foreclosure proceedings on the collateral property under Mandy Walker's name first thing in the morning at the fastest possible pace. Before hitting send, I attached the video I'd accidentally captured at the party, renaming it evidence_01. I reviewed the message one final time, then pressed send. The email disappeared into the server. Inside me, the flames of revenge rose, quiet, steady, and scorching. At dawn the next morning, I received a call from Robert. His voice was as composed as ever, yet beneath it, I sensed an unwavering resolve. Jenny, I've read your email and reviewed the attached videos and photos. This is not merely a case of contract violation. Her actions constitute clear evidence of intentional harm toward a child. As per your request, I will proceed immediately and with maximum speed. His words sounded like the gong marking the beginning of my revenge. Naturally, a few days later, I received a hysterical phone call from Mandy. Jenny, what the hell is this? I got a letter from the lawyer. Are you seriously going to take my house? Are you actually doing this? She was screaming as if her world were ending. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. I simply responded quietly, if I weren't serious, do you think I would have hired an attorney? All further communication goes through Robert. I won't speak to you directly again. I ended the call and blocked her number without hesitation. A flood of calls from my parents followed, but I ignored every one of them. My ears existed no longer to hear their lies or their sniveling. A few days later, I received an unexpected call from Sean, Mandy's fiancé. His voice was drained and full of exhaustion as he apologized deeply. Jenny, you were right. After the party, I confronted her. She kept lying at first, but when I told her I'd already heard everything from you, she finally admitted it all. The debt she owed you, the cafe's financial disaster. I had no idea. I completely fell for her polished facade. I'm truly sorry. He expressed sympathy for me and quietly revealed that he too had been a victim. At the end of the call, he said, I'm going to formally call off the engagement. I hope you and your children can return to peace as soon as possible. That was the moment the very first domino fell. The domino effect was spectacular. Later, mutual acquaintances told me things that surpassed even my expectations. For prideful Mandy, having her engagement broken off by a wealthy fiancé was nothing short of a social death sentence. She had strangled the goose that laid her golden eggs with her own hands. Without her biggest source of funding, her cafe collapsed instantly. Her business had always been running on fumes, surviving only because of Sean's financial support. Payments fell behind. Skilled baristas quit one after another, saying, the owner spends money like crazy. Harsh reviews began appearing on the cafe's social media. The service is terrible. Overpriced for what you get. One day, when I happened to walk by the cafe, there was a huge for lease sign on the window. It took less than 3 months for her shop to shutter completely. Around the same time, my parents were dragged into the whirlwind of tragedy they had helped create. 2 months after I stopped paying their rent, they received an official eviction notice from the court. They panicked and left dozens of messages on my voicemail. Jenny, this is your fault. You're jealous of Mandy's happiness. That's why this happened. There wasn't even a hint of self-reflection in their voices, but all they felt was rage. Rage that the ATM they believed should take care of them had finally stopped obeying. Even then, I didn't react at all. Cornered, they descended into even more grotesque behavior. First, my parents began calling several of my major clients. They spewed blatant lies like, our daughter is mentally unstable and abusing us. Fortunately, I had already informed my clients through Robert, telling them, if you receive any contact like this, please forward everything to my attorney. So there was no actual harm. One client even sent me an email later. Jenny, you must have gone through a lot. Your honest and calm response has only strengthened our trust in you. Don't worry. Just focus on your work. In fact, the trust my clients had in me became even stronger because of my integrity. My parents' actions had completely backfired, but unbelievably, they didn't stop there. They even called the family of my late husband. Jenny won't let us see our grandchildren, they said. But my mother-in-law replied, cool and unwavering, we know everything you've done to Jenny and the children. Do not ever call this house again. I had more allies than I ever realized, and naturally after that, they put their last hope in Mandy. But after losing both her engagement and her cafe, she no longer had the means to support my parents. Having lost everything, Mandy drifted from one friend's house to another. However, her arrogant personality ruined every place she stayed, and she was soon kicked out everywhere. People grew sick of her constant whining. It's all my sister's fault that my life turned out like this. A mutual acquaintance later told me she'd sunk into alcoholism and would badmouth me day and night. My family, tangled together like creatures drowning in a swamp, dragged each other down as they sank. And I simply watched it all unfold as calmly as if I were reading a report. While their world was collapsing, a quiet peace had begun to settle into mine. But I had already calculated that a beast stripped of everything would eventually bear its fangs. And then, that night finally came. At 2 a.m., violent pounding rattled my front door. On the monitor stood Mandy, drunk, hair wild, completely unhinged. "Jenny, open the door! You ruined my entire life." Her shrill screams made it clear that my children were frightened. Without hesitation, I called the police. "Someone from my former family has shown up because of a financial dispute. She's pounding on my door and screaming, 'My children are scared. Please send officers immediately.'" I recited my lines flawlessly, as the victim. For the 10 minutes it took for the officers to arrive, Mandy's screaming performance continued. "Because of you, things with Sean fell apart. You're the one who exposed the debt. He broke off the engagement. This is all your fault." I was stunned. She was even blaming me for her lies being exposed. Her thought process was so absurd that it was almost impressive. When she yelled, "I never thought you'd actually use the contract against me," I understood completely. This woman would never, ever understand her own stupidity. Not even at the end. When the police arrived, I watched from behind the curtains as they calmly questioned her, like a scene from a movie. They warned her that staying on private property without permission was trespassing and told her to leave. But in her hysterical state, she refused to comply and began resisting violently. After she was restrained and taken away, I called Robert. "Robert, add this to the list and file for a restraining order as well." One chain at a time. I would cut every single one with my own hands. The moment I pulled the legal trigger, the sandcastle they had been desperately clinging to collapsed far faster and far more loudly than I imagined. Mandy, who had been taken by the police, was formally convicted of attempted property damage and making threats. On the day of the trial, she appeared in court wearing expensive designer clothes that no longer suited her gaunt face, crying softly as she claimed, "All of this happened because of my sister's years of jealousy and harassment." But the moment the courtroom screen showed the party video that Robert had submitted as decisive evidence, her sniffles stopped and quiet laughter spread through the audience. When the verdict was announced, Robert told me she screamed, "This can't be happening," and collapsed to her knees in tears. As a first-time offender, she avoided jail time, but she received a suspended sentence and was ordered to attend mandatory counseling. And above all, the formal restraining order issued by the court erected an unbreakable legal wall between us. From there, their downfall accelerated. Robert, with his impeccable work, seized Mandy's house and put it up for auction. The day the enforcement officer visited her home, neighbors apparently witnessed everything. She always acted so proud, but she was clinging to the officer and crying. It was pathetic. When the large sign reading foreclosure was posted in front of her house, she tried to rip it out in a hysterical frenzy and became the laughingstock of the entire neighborhood. Even hearing all of that, my heart didn't ache in the slightest. The house was purchased by a young couple for a price far below market value. Later, in the report from Robert, it stated, "Although the sale price was slightly below market value, we were still able to recover the full amount of the $70,000 principal, the accumulated unpaid interest, and all attorney's fees." Mandy was left with almost nothing. At the same time, the creditors from her cafe didn't stay quiet. Using the asset information that Robert Jackson had secured, they all launched their claims at once. She was pushed to the brink of bankruptcy by penalties for breaking her lease and unpaid bills to vendors. My parents' fate was equally miserable. After being evicted from their home, they began drifting between cheap motels along the highway, living off their meager pensions. The stress and unstable environment took a toll on their health, and my father's chronic illness worsened. They called every relative they could, spreading lies like, "Jenny threw us out of our home." But later, one relative told me this. Your father called and said, "We're homeless because of Jenny." So I told him, "We saw the video from the party. You were laughing through the whole thing. You have no right to blame her. Don't call us again." They were socially isolated by the consequences they created themselves. 6 months passed. Ironically, hitting rock bottom seemed to be the only medicine that worked for them. According to what I heard from others, Mandy finally swallowed her pride and started working as a cashier at a local supermarket. My parents also managed to secure a spot in public housing, giving them at least the minimum to survive. Whether they had finally taken a step toward independence or had simply found a new host to cling to, I had no way of knowing. All I knew was this: since the restraining order was issued, none of them ever appeared in my life again. A year passed after all the chaos. We learned what healthy boundaries truly meant. It is the courage to decide for yourself what you will accept and what you will no longer allow. For the sake of protecting your own heart and your own dignity, we sold the old house. I no longer wanted to raise my children in a place soaked with memories of them. And so we bought a new, small house in a quiet suburb to completely break from the past and reclaim peaceful days. In the garden of the new house, Lucas was engrossed in his woodworking. Nearby, Katie ran around happily with her friends, filling the air with carefree laughter. On Katie's 7th birthday, Lucas shyly but proudly presented her with a small handmade cupcake. Katie beamed, took it with delight, and said, "Thank you, Lucas," before taking a big bite. I recorded the scene quietly, this time with tears of happiness in my eyes. Their smiles were the greatest proof that my 3-year battle had been worth it. Then one day, a letter arrived from Mandy. "Jenny, I was wrong about everything. I'm living in my car now. Please, even just food money is fine. Can you help me with $100? Even reading her pitiful plea, my heart didn't move an inch. I stood in front of the shredder with the letter in my hands. Then I turned on the machine. With a harsh mechanical grinding, her apology and begs for help turned into thin strips of paper. I placed the shredded pieces into a trash bag, tying it tight. Very, very tight. People say that blood is thicker than water, but I learned something different. Sometimes that very blood is a deadly poison that eats away at your life. And poison must be purged completely, by your own hand. My only regret is that I didn't make this decision much sooner.